What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of Split Screen D&D, the place where we're attacking all things Dungeons and Dragons from both sides of the screen. Ooh, a little martial arts channeling. No riff.
No, I'm channeling the monk today. You know, the first time ever and the last time. I'll never do it again.
Remind me, I have something really cool to show you on the monk front.
Oh,
I know that's a weird thing.
That's a weird thing for you to say.
My name's Tom Quinn, resident dungeon master here at Modern Myth.
And I'm Josh White, resident player character here at Modern Myth.
And today we're actually going to be kicking off a series that we've kind of been rolling around for a little while. And that series is the Tiers of Play. We're not going to be certainly not going to be following the 5th edition prescribed Tiers of Play, more of a simplified early, mid, and late tier. And where better to start than where most characters must, early tier Dungeons and Dragons,
Level
5th edition.
1. But before we jump into that, hey, Internet, have you been working out? You looking good.
They do.
They looking good. Well, you know, it just mean the world to us. You just beautiful people. If you'd hit that little like button and that subscribe button, and if you're feeling up for it, because I know you are, because you've been working out. If you could hit that little bell, so you know that when we're releasing our comment, you can watch it. But seriously, and all joking aside, ladies and gentlemen, it's insane, like how the comments and the subscriptions. Please keep it going. Spread the word. Modern Myth for life. Thank you guys so much for all that you've done. But early tier, man.
One last note on that. If you guys want to help us keep making content like this,
Thank you.
Forgive him because this is actually brand new. We're both struggling with this one, but check us out at Patreon/ModMyth if you guys want to help us keep doing what it is we're doing over on the channel here. But yeah, let's jump right in.
Okay.
Low tier D&D, and like I said, I think each of these episodes we're hopefully going to be kind of highlighting, I guess, the DM and player considerations for each of these tiers. Does that sound like a fair
kind of what we do here at Split Screen? That's our MO.
I mean, I just know that I don't have like a lot of topics. There's a really kind of hard bullet pointed.
That's true.
And but I think that these are topics that you could say a lot on. So I hope we're going to do these justice.
I hope so.
I know
we probably won't.
All those beautiful people are going to pick up our slack in the comments.
Let us know what points we miss. We love reading that stuff, and it helps us. Think about the game.
There's so much, literally so much that I put in my pocket coming out of the comment section to bring to our table.
I love it.
So let's talk low tier D&D. And before we jump into low tier D&D, I am curious to know where do you land on low tier, mid tier, high tier? This conversation, again, we're not getting into mid and high, right. But I just want to know as a player, and obviously every player is going to have their own opinion on this, but where do you land? Is mid tier awesome? I'm sorry. Is low tier?
What are we talking about again, Tom?
Is low tier awesome? Is low tier? Oh man, just start me at level 7 and let's get going. Where do you stand on low tier?
I love low tier.
I love
low tier. Low tier is one of my favorite tiers, if not my favorite.
So I think the immediate follow-up question is why? Like, and now I want to. Before you answer that, I want to lay out, and you can correct me if you're in a different headspace. Right. But I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. I would say, and now you in the comments, give us your 2 cents.
Yeah.
I'm going to mark out low tier. The transition from low tier is about when you hit level 5.
1 through 5.
The main reason I'll say, well, I'll actually even say 1 through 4, because when you hit level 5, your wizards have their fireball, your fighters have their extra tech, and now obviously those are purely combat oriented, but that power scale at this point, now you have 5 hit dice versus your 1 hit dice you started with. And I think it's where a lot of the big subclass features really click on.
Yep.
All right, not even necessarily subclass features, but class features. And certainly where a lot of casters start getting access to some really interesting things.
Yeah.
So
Ooh.
That's about the ballpark. And again, we may disagree on the
Yeah.
exact levels.
Yeah.
But just so everyone at home has an idea of what we're talking
Right.
about, is
1
that
through 5. I would say 1 through. I might go 1 through 6, but the same ballpark,
okay.
right?
Well,
Same.
you're wrong, but let's continue.
Oh, fuck you.
No, but in that ballpark. So we're talking about
Yeah.
the first 5 to 6 levels, let's say, of,
Right.
of Dungeons and Dragons. Why are those levels your favorite? Especially if you don't mind me picking your brain.
Yep.
I'm blown away when any player enjoys level 1. As a DM, I can think of a number of reasons why
Yeah.
that really early tier, there's some cool stuff. But what is it about early tier that
I will say level 1 is kind of a hard level. That is where you're so much in that life or death situation. You can run across a fucking splinter on the ground and it might kill you. I mean, that's level 1.
if you're a wizard, it will kill you. The splinters in my world, they do 2d8 damage. So if you are a wizard, you better
Man, they'll
hope to
take out a
hell-
barbarian, man.
You hope no. Barbarian's got it.
2d8.
Barbarian's
Anyway, yeah, level 1's hard just because you are just so on the edge of dying all the time. But what I love about the low levels, it's the same in like any of my favorite movies. Rocky 1 is one of my favorite movies.
Okay.
I know. I'll die on that hill. Rocky 1 is a fantastic. I'm not talking about Rocky 2, 3, 4. I'm talking about Rocky 1. Some of them, they're good. Don't get me wrong. But Rocky 1 is fantastic because it really shows you the hero's journey.
Do
right?
you know that probably one of the only reasons I exist is because of Rocky 1? That's the very first movie my mom and dad went on a date to. Rocky 1.
I don't know how to process this, dude. Anyway, sorry.
I'm just throwing it out there that literally you might be like doing a solo show right now if it wasn't for Rocky 1.
So hit the subscribe button because my co-host here owes his life to Rocky 1. But I love but it could be anything where you start with the hero's journey, right? They're maybe they have some potential, but they train, they work, they put in the blood, sweat, and tears, and they rise above what they were before. I love that process. I love the montages. I love that stuff.
You know, in saying that, I was just thinking and I want to get to this at the very end. There are some, I think, in the broader, the big picture, there are some problems with early tier D&D.
Okay.
But I love that you used kind of a montage of growth to reference early tier D&D because graft. That's precisely what level 1 to level, say, 5 are.
The amount of the hit dice you get, and the hit points, absolutely.
I mean you're early on, your power curve is borderline exponential.
Yeah,
you know,
huge.
I mean,
Twice as powerful.
Right. A really easy example is when you're level 1 and you become level 2. You potentially double or even more than double your hit points, depending on, let's say you're rolling, but even let's say you're taking standard, you double your hit points.
Yep.
Well, by level 3, you're only increasing them by a third. By level 4, it's by a quarter. The interesting thing is that I love that you used Rocky, a film that I think really is iconic for the montage of like going from being like a, kind of a bum enforcer who's got some boxing chops to facing off against the world champ.
Yep.
So it's interesting that you were talking about putting in the work and that growth, and I really think that these early levels express that at a kind of a frightening pace.
Yeah.
I would say literally relative to the rest of your progression from 5 on, let's say,
right.
Don't get me wrong, some of your capstone stuff is insane.
Yeah, it's when you get to a really high level D&D.
But if you graph it, you basically have like, holy crap, I'm getting super powerful, and now I'm just chilling, kind of getting a little more powerful, and now I'm super powerful.
Yeah, and that really depends on your class and subclass, your power curve and all that stuff.
Well,
if you look at like
it definitely does. But,
Moon Druid, like second level, they're baller.
Well, but they also choose their circle at second level,
right? So
but I'm just saying, any it would be third for wizards. It would be
Five.
second. So they get their school at second as well.
Okay.
But third for martial.
Right. Paladins get spell casting at second level. That's where you get
I think
smarts.
pretty much all the casting happens at. But all that to say, I really like that analogy. I don't know if you were intending the montage lean or not, but I really think levels 1 through 5 and a lot of like on the old school side, you hear the nod of like, early level D&D is just earning the right to be the protagonist in the ongoing story.
Yes.
And I think for 5th edition anyways, it really is at level 1, hey, you're someone with some potential.
Right.
You're not just the average Joe.
Right.
Clearly.
Right. Yeah, I think especially in 5e, even level 1, you're heads and shoulders.
Oh, no,
above
no.
most
I mean,
people.
like you might be when you consider what your ability scores could be at level 1, depending on how you establish that.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of, I guess, kind of thinking about those early levels. Obviously, they're taking place throughout the narrative. They're taking place. But if you're not crazy about how that power curve lays into the broader expression of the game, you could even think about it as kind of these early levels are really the party montaging their way into being the type of heroes capable of some 15 levels later,
godlike it. Yeah,
dealing with the problems on a celestial pantheon wide level. So I really like that nod.
So that's me as a player character. But what do you said you also really enjoy?
Yeah, I will say that one of the big things I love about early level is a bit of a misnomer in that one of the things I love is I love meeting the characters. Now, if we start a campaign at 7, I'm meeting them at 7.
Right,
If we started at 11, but I think it's a different introduction to go like to steal a reference from the Onion movie. I'm Proteus the Invincible, and this is who I am, and I've felled these gods.
Right,
And let's say 5 level 15 characters are introducing themselves.
Yeah.
That's 3 sessions because any one of them has to basically go like, well, first, after laying Orcus low, the fool, and it's like you. Whereas if it's a level 1 character introducing themselves, we're as close. This is the beauty, and I'll put it this way.
Okay.
At level 1, your character is as synonymous in power with the player as they will ever be.
Ooh, so you can relate more to your character during this tier than any other.
Certainly, and I think the longer you spend with them, you can continue to relate.
Right.
But to just go now, if you've played eons of D&D, maybe you have no problem just jumping right in. But when it comes to delivering in that very first tavern you meet or on that battlefield or whatever cool scenario your DM has laid out for, like, this is how we all come to know each other.
Right.
When it's a level 1 character doing it, it's really an opportunity for the players to reintroduce themselves to each other, not characters who have done crazy things and all have, it's not a dick measuring contest.
There's always a dick measuring contest.
Well, I mean, considering you have 2, you've got Amanda and Ariel both in your.
It's still a dick measuring contest.
Yeah. So, and somehow you're coming up 3rd. How's that?
I'm average.
No, but I really think and that there's something special about how relatable a level 1 character is, especially in getting to know them, because there's all sorts of larger than life characters in narrative mediums of all kinds.
Right.
Film, literature, plays. I mean, certainly in the Dungeons and Dragons sphere. I mean, everyone knows there's names you can mention that whether they've been in your campaign or not, you know them. These characters at some point were level 1. They were level 1 at some point. Mordenkainen was level 1. Driss was level 1.
Yep.
I mean, these characters that you just go like, what were they like then? Because we, as an audience, we get to meet them at a certain point, whether
Right.
however close or not that is to their humble origins. And I think there's really something as a DM in the context of getting to know the characters. Those early formative levels really establish what drives those characters. And, even if they're the players you've played with 10 campaigns over,
Right.
Presumably they're bringing new characters to the table who are motivated in unique ways. And I think there's just something special about those early levels to learn that as a DM, because that's such a valuable tool for everything moving forward, is understanding, back when they were a nobody, what was it that motivated them?
Right.
It's kind of almost the Citizen Kane
That's it.
Rosebud kind of, in the sense that, like, there might be something that's supremely meaningful to a level 1 character that even that character has forgotten how meaningful.
I was just
That
thinking
was.
about that. I was trying to remember Kel at level 1.
And that's an interesting thing. It's like,
Yeah.
as a DM, I think you can introduce really meaningful moments in mid and late tier play by better remembering. This probably comes from note taking and whatever tools used,
Right.
but by better remembering something that was really meaningful to that character back then. Again, a reintroduction of an NPC that they really.
Oh
you
gosh,
know,
yeah. Who's that halfling buddy I used to have?
Eric.
Yep,
Eric, yeah. And I mean, again, perfect. I mean, I'm so glad you segued with that, because he's basically a backstory character. I mean, he was barely present in the campaign as of session 1. But what a cool opportunity for me as a DM for them to re-meet and Kel to be, for just the briefest of moments, level 1 Kel again.
Oh,
Like, that's a hard thing to deliver as
that's
a DM.
gonna be hard. Well, as a player too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you've seen the world, when you've done unbelievable things. I mean, we in the Rovers campaign are moving into late tier play. What an unbelievable opportunity to kind of inject some nostalgia
Yeah.
into
the power of nostalgia.
which is, I think, a hugely powerful.
Do you remember
tool.
berries?
You remember? You remember Eric? You remember that little
Remember Eric?
halfling who was going to freeze to death, and you let him come
I
work in
let
the
him
tavern
in.
with you?
Yeah, he was
You
cool.
were a nice guy.
I was once upon a time.
Once upon a time. Now you're just a mean.
dick.
Now you're an asshole.
Yeah, basically.
But
It
such,
happens.
such is life. So I think those are kind of these are great things about early tier. And I think you even started to highlight some of the challenges with level 1 as a
Yeah, do
player.
you want to talk about that?
But yeah, let's talk a little bit about, like, what are some considerations for, on the player side,
right.
early tier, like, are there things, I mean, very possibly there are things that you just, as a DM, you can just do away with. Things that players, like, they might love everything else, and if we just got rid of this one thing, we could really enjoy being in this space.
Yeah.
I don't know. But what are the cons, I guess?
Yeah.
Is
And it's the con that immediately comes to mind, and I hinted at it earlier, is just the mortality of your character. But I don't think you should get away with it. Like, don't throw that away.
I completely agree. Yeah, I think that's 5e of all the editions doesn't do a great job with this, but I think that certainly in kind of an old school ethos,
Right.
that mortality is what, surviving out of the early tier is what grants you, the connection to that character. Like, you've made it now. Like, now you can feel comfortable investing, in this character, knowing that, hey, I think we might go the long haul
But
here.
when I build my next character, I don't want to go at it from like, I'm not gonna really like flesh out this character, get into it until I reach 3rd level.
Well, also that's your. I mean, you love doing that.
Yeah, I love creating characters.
If there was certainly, for instance, if I instituted a bunch of old school mechanics into our next campaign, it might be ill-advised to 1 to 20 a character at level 1.
Yeah.
But again, you might love doing it. You just go like, whatever, I love doing this.
That might be
if
what
they die, they
I
die.
do anyway. Yeah.
But it is a deal where I think I mean, the idea of, certainly in 5th edition, the idea of making mortality even less
Right.
an element in in the game, I actually consider it to be one of the strengths of early D&D. I know
can see that.
obviously it's a concern from the player side. I mean, you
Yes.
don't want to die. No,
Right.
I mean, if you're in character, no character wants
Right.
to die. But as a DM, I'll say one of the strengths is we actually have the least workload to present challenging encounters
Right. You want to talk about
in those
having-
early levels.
You want to have weight? Yeah, just like, hey, do you walk in this room? You could probably die. Like, you don't know what the hell's going to happen.
Right. I think being able to present scenarios that the players view as deadly. Because let's say you're at level 10.
Yeah.
It's going to take a lot. You're going to have to put a lot in a room for the players to walk in and go, that's deadly.
Yeah, I was about to say it's probably not a room. It's probably a sequence of rooms. And then maybe by the end of the sequence, they start to feel it.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, the attrition of that.
Right. That's usually that's what I feel like higher level D&D is attrition.
Yeah, and I think that so I think some of the again, it's interesting because I think it's a two sides of the same coin.
Right.
Obviously, as a player, it's a con. Mortality is a con. You know, I mean,
Yeah, it can. Well, it can be.
But I think I think most players acknowledge too, though, that despite wanting to do everything in your power to avoid it, if it was gone, it would be to the detriment of the players.
Right.
You know, clearly it needs to be there.
Yeah, and going off that, just the feeling that you're just a lot of like I often say this. I play D&D to feel powerful, and you are never less powerful than early tier.
Right.
But I think this is I think this is why this is such a powerful tier for me. Is every time I mention a con, it's like, yeah, that's kind of a con, but it does serve a higher purpose.
Yes. I really like that the characters, there's no cell in their bodies that consider mortality a con, but the players understand why mortality is an important aspect of the game. And that's the duality that DMs don't really have to, they don't have to exist in two minds, you know. I mean,
Right.
maybe they're running NPCs and they're running, you know, whatever, but ultimately, you know, to play your character effectively, they have to be doing everything in their power to survive.
Right.
And yeah, I think in those early tiers, knowing that mortality is a very real potential serves the higher purpose that needs to carry through. And I actually think that one of the big nods to early tier as DMs is to, you know, again, in those first 5 levels, players are becoming exponentially more powerful.
Yes.
And you know, I've advocated a number of times on split screen that you don't always want every encounter they have to have perfectly scaled with their power level. Sometimes they need to realize how much more powerful they are.
Right,
and
right.
Just curb stomp some goblins. Like,
I love it.
yep. But simultaneously, I think that sensation of we are vulnerable, we are mortal, is something that we as DMs should really, really cling to as long as is reasonable. Again, I mean, I think you begin having to step outside of the rules as written if you're going to deliver mortality inducing
Right.
challenges later in the game. But I think certainly as you move into mid-tier, if you're acknowledging how much more powerful the characters have gotten, occasionally giving them an encounter that still lets them go, we are still small fish
Right.
in a big pond.
Right.
And I think that's the crux, is really trying to maintain that spirit. And again, it admittedly, I mean, if you read the rules, if you're playing by 5th edition rules, and I'm not advocating that you raw dog the 5th edition rule book, because if you do, you won't have many tools at your disposal to continue to give that sense of early tier mortality concerns. That's a really difficult thing to do beyond early tier. And I think it is. It's a two-sided coin. From the character standpoint,
Yeah.
it's clearly a con that we are mortal and we are reminded of it regularly. As a DM, those are meaningful encounters, and we want to provide those.
Right.
And I don't think anyone is going to argue that the higher tier we move, that it doesn't get more challenging to give the players a sense of, holy crap, I might be dead here.
Right. Yeah, I think you hit. We'll talk about it later, I'm sure, as we hit mid and high tier. That there are so many great like scenarios, feelings, whatever you want to call it, that you have in low tier that need to be carried on into mid and high tier. That rules as written isn't always is super great.
Right.
So would you always? You're running a campaign. Do you always want to run like low tier?
No. I love low tier, and like I said, I think one of the big reasons, the narrative reasons I love it, is because I really like seeing the party go from a group of strangers who circumstance has brought together, and we watch like, how do these guys become? Is it a singular moment, like a success in battle, that they go like, holy crap, we are the XYZ,
Yep,
you know, this is
yep.
what or you know,
Is it a
are there some
slow-
growing pains? Are
Yep.
there, you know,
Stabbing each other, what
you know,
parties do.
it's apparently.
Sorry, Amanda.
But so I love that process, and again, that can happen at any tier. But I think, kind of in the same regard as it gets harder as you move up in tier to provide those interesting challenges directly to the players, you have to work at it more, anyways. The same can be said of, in those spaces where players fatigue, or I should say, characters fatigue more rapidly.
Right.
Wizards don't have as many spells
Right,
at their
spell
disposal.
slots. Yep.
There's something almost handcrafted about that to say, we need to spend a little time around the campfire.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, really potent opportunity to have inter-party exchanges that begin to tie those bonds together. Whereas when it's like, level 17 and you're like, well, a short rest will a short rest and I'll be able to destroy 6 more suns, no problem. So that, I think that the dynamic changes there a little bit.
Right.
But to answer your question, no, that's certainly not a call. Like, hey, everything you're running should be started in low tier.
Right.
And to highlight a serious con, and it's a difficult con to talk about when you're only talking about low tier.
Okay.
Like, let's say you were sitting down to go, hey, we're going to run a 1 to 5 campaign.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
I actually think you can do something really meaningful in 1 to 5.
Absolutely.
No problem. You'll get all the benefits of low tier play. And I think, if your final battle is occurring in the 5-6 range,
Yep.
people are going to be able to bring some really interesting skills
Yeah.
to bear. And
Yeah. A couple battles in 5 for sure.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
But I will say that I think that low tier also, if you're talking about a long form campaign, low tier also presents some. Low tier is kind of the odd man out for the exact same reasons we talked about this power curve. Is if we're telling a narrative story, but we know that the first 5 levels of that story are kind of montaged through because the characters are growing so rapidly.
Yeah.
Then we get 5 levels of montage and then 15 levels of actual storytelling. Whereas if, for a lot of reasons, I think you could start a party. Like it's just the relative power curve of saying you're level 1.
Right.
A very meaningful fight for you and your party might be clearing out old lady Hilderman's cellar of rats.
Fuck rats, dude.
Like,
But
but
they're always everywhere.
legitimately, at level 1, that might be a
Yeah, no.
meaningful encounter.
Yeah, we've it depends on the rats. Yeah.
4 levels later, let's
Okay.
say. What's the top end of a meaningful encounter, and how different are those experiences? I mean,
Yeah.
and that level of growth can be a little bit difficult to work in narratively,
Right.
given the fact that from 5 to 20, you have a very kind of let's call it linear
Yeah,
progression.
it's not the huge jumps.
And so it can feel a little disjunction. And that's not to say, obviously,
Right.
it can happen. There's many 1 to 20s that run out there, but it's just to say that I think those early levels
right.
stand as kind of the odd man out because of how rapidly that growth occurs,
Yeah.
which makes it a great space to either run just an early tier campaign,
Yep.
or I might go so far as to say skip early tier altogether
Okay.
and just start running at mid to high tier and run a campaign. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to go, hey guys, let's roll up some level 10 characters and run a 10 to 20. Like, it's a different campaign for
Yeah,
sure.
For sure.
But I think from the DM side, narratively speaking, you don't have to play the game of how do I go from fighting rats in a cellar to fighting gods on a different plane of existence.
Right.
And again, it's like, over what course of time? We're talking 20 levels, but over what course of time? Depending on how things are playing out, is that a year? Is that 2 years? Is that a
Right.
decade? Is that, because if you start talking about, okay, this is over 20 or 30 years of these characters' lives, okay. But if you're talking about 5 years of their lives, they literally go from fighting. I mean, what were you doing 5 years ago? And how does it compare to what you're doing now being fighting gods? Like
Right,
how,
right,
I
right.
mean, like, so there's some narrative challenges, I think, in that space. But I would just, so that's the only thing I would say is absolutely, I don't think it's the immediate place. Like, we got to start low tier.
Yes.
But I think it's a great place to start if you know you're only doing a 5 to 7 level campaign.
Yeah.
I would see more flack being thrown up from players not wanting to drudge through level 1. I completely get that.
Yeah, I get that too. And I'm just trying to think of like what I'd like to do. I like to start at level 3 because then I get to I experience my character as a low level for a couple levels, and then I experience the power spike.
Right.
And then I continue it on. So I like that. And in fact, I was going to ask you this. Sorry for touching the mic. What do you think about doing the first couple levels as backstory?
I love that. Well, you know how much I love.
That's what I know.
Running backstory, and generally we run that backstory where you're basically running up to level 1.
Right.
But actually, I think there is more merit because my options really get to open up. I don't have to explain why you've done these cool things and are still level 1.
Right.
I'm a huge fan of running individually, or I mean, if players, or I should say characters, know each other,
Right.
through their backstory, great. But basically, what are the events that lead up to bringing these characters together? Why not let that be levels 1 and 2?
That's what
And you all meet as you become level 3. You all meet.
Yeah. That you're
100%.
established at this point.
I'm 100% behind that, and I actually think most character building that occurs. I certainly know if I go, ooh, I'm going to play a XYZ. The very next thing I think is, which subclass of that XYZ am I going to play?
Right.
And I actually think that's where most people start, even if you're playing a level 1 character. And I'm not a big fan of building out way ahead of time.
No, which is stupid, but whatever.
But I think the subclass is such a definitive tweak on the style that you're going to have that most people are considering that even at level 1.
Yeah.
Even if they're not, even if at level 3 they're not considering 5 or 7 or whatever.
Right.
I think the subclass is just, and at 3 everyone's got their
everyone's got
subclass.
something
So
going on.
it's a really a great place where as you kind of come together as a group
Right.
and become the party, you are not only, hey, this is my broad skill set, you're, hey, this is how I've come to hone it to be a more specific weapon on the battlefield, a more specific tool in social scenarios, and people really have I think a good sense of the strengths and weaknesses of their respective party members. So I completely, I would actually say I like that even more than just
Sweet.
running up to a level 1.
So I was thinking,
I'm all for that, but I think future campaigns like that we might run here on Modern Myth,
Right.
I think I've already told you guys, I don't really have an intention of running another 1 to 20.
That's yeah.
And even that, we might start at 3 and do like a 3 to 10.
Yeah.
You know, and
But I- like
mainly
yours-
because there's a lot of settings I'd like to explore.
Right.
And
I think you mentioned like,
vibes
oh, let's
that.
start at level 6. It's like, no, I want to experience a little bit of low tier.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, I'd love to run call it a short form campaign that's like a 17 to 20 or even just a level 21 shot or something like that. You know,
Oh, that'd be
just
crazy.
because you don't spend that much, you know, I mean,
That's the thing that sucks about level 20, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, when we get to high end tiers. Like, yay, you reached the capstone. Enjoy it for 5 seconds. Like, congratulations.
possibly. Yeah, absolutely.
Unless
And
you-
now I think there are some cool supplements that allow you to go beyond that. in
Ooh,
which case-
which I don't know about.
yeah, I mean, I think as far as low tier goes,
Yeah.
I think the only other pro that I have, and I mean, I know I said on the DM side,
Yeah.
it's easier to present challenging combat scenario, really challenging encounters, period, because everyone is worse at everything. You know,
Right.
they're only going to get better.
And you don't have to worry about like the weird power that the paladin has. No, the paladin has it. You attack, and that's what you got.
Right. The idea that being able to basically, so you're creating these various encounters, whether they be explorative, social, combat.
Right.
But I think one of the real advantages low tier has, and it's something that this is a bit of a ping to older editions and other systems, is how snappy combat is.
That's
you know, one of the
true.
drawbacks, obviously players love getting new sweet abilities. but
Love
when
it.
you've got
Oh, I
40
love it.
options on your turn,
Yep.
it stands to reason it's going to take longer than when you've got 2.
That's true. I see that as a challenge to players to try to make combat as snappy at level 15 as it is at level 2. I understand that that's not possible, but I think that's what you should strive for.
Well, yeah, and I think we'll be able to hit on that in the later
Yes,
tier
yeah,
segments. But again, it's another deal where I think there's so many things about when you sit down. Let's use level 3 because I think that
That's a
level
nice
3 is
spot.
such a sweet
It is a
spot.
great spot.
So let's use a combat breaks out at level 3.
Okay.
As a DM and as a player, you should really take note of how does that combat feel? What's the pacing of that combat? What's the pacing of? I mean, so much about the game at that zone, and what can each person at the table do respectively as you move through the other tiers of play
Right.
to remember and to some extent emulate that from a pacing standpoint. I
Yes.
get you're going to have a lot more options. There's no two ways about it, especially full casters. You're going to have, you know,
A million ways to solve one problem. Yeah.
right. But I think one of the things that really makes combat great and really actually makes every aspect great is when it's happening rapidly.
Yeah.
Cool. A really tense social
Right.
encounter is happening. Imagine if the DM sits there for 10 minutes thinking about how the Duke responds.
Right.
And then the player spends 10 minutes thinking about how, you know, I
Right.
mean,
Yes.
it doesn't feel the same as if they're in a full blown, they're trading
Right.
barbs and jests and,
Right.
you know, and all of that I think is so much easier to manifest at low levels because to some extent, the game has gotten out of your way. It, you know, as you as a character become more and more potent, the game is handing you new things you can do, and you
Yeah.
and you need to assess those things to make an
Gotcha.
option. But the game has basically gone like, well, you don't know all that much. Have fun,
Right.
And that's exactly what you do. You have fun,
Right. You explore the space. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I think there's so much about the ethos of low tier play, and I think this is also a nod back to earlier editions because I think the feel of low tier carries longer
Yep.
in older editions, or at least carries more weight during the time it is around. As we move through this series, and we're talking about mid and high tier, and certainly as we at our table, as anyone else at their table are playing, I think everybody would find that cool. You've got 20 different options. You got
Right.
some to go. I've got these 20 options. What like what was my player's mindset back when I only had two?
Right.
Like how would I have, and I think being able to kind of grab that feeling
Right.
of that snappiness, that pacing.
Yeah. And I want to talk about that as we get into the mid tier, how to stay focused and like, yeah, you get new powers, but those powers just exemplify what you're already doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I mean, like I said, this is going to be a series, so I know that these videos are, they're not going to, they may not go the distance. Like I said, I'd like this to be a relatively concise is a word I don't like using because I'm me.
Yeah.
So-
Well, and when we start going, man, who knows where we'll go.
But I mean, you got any other thoughts on?
No, we could do the wrap up if you want, man. Like as a DM, what would your advice be to other DMs who are running the low tier?
Well, my advice would be enjoy it while it lasts because it's only going to get more difficult from here. The beauty, especially for new DMs out there, is exactly that. Like, enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah.
Take notes of what's happening and what makes this exciting.
Yep.
Because being able to deliver that in later tiers, it's going to get more challenging. But you'll find the cornerstones of what makes a combat exciting. What makes a social. A tense social exchange or a funny one, what makes that was really land, all that's going to be happening in these early stages of the game.
Yeah.
And the better you are at identifying that and figuring out how you can recreate that in some elevated state for the other tiers,
Right.
I think will really lend to your success as you move through the different tiers of play.
Absolutely.
Player side?
Player side, my tips for low tier is to really embrace the suck. You are your character, it's such a unique opportunity to understand your character. As a human being, I find out more about myself, who I am, and what I stand for when I'm going through the hard times. Like when you're mid tier, when you're high tier, when you're Thor, when you're a god, it's hard to relate to that character. It's also hard to like figure out who that character is. But when you are a low level character, it's a very humanizing. I don't care what race you're playing. There's a humanizing factor about that should be embraced. Yeah, your character might die in 5e. I don't think that there is a danger, and it should always be that danger. But don't use that as a fear to figure out who your character is, because once you figure that out, you can carry that out through everything.
Right.
And it's such a fun tier of play.
Yeah.
Yep.
It really is in terms of beginning to establish your character's story. And I think you really hit it on the head, leaving the breadcrumbs that if you have to mentally go back to where you started,
Yep.
if you don't have that history, if you've erased the low tiers of play, let's say, and started later in the game,
start as a god, then
then it becomes much more difficult to. I like that you actually used humanizing, because whatever class race combination you're playing in game, as a player you're a human, and everything we're doing is meaningful to us as humans,
right?
And so that humanizing element that I think no tier even comes close.
Yes, 100%
to embodying. So,
Yep.
And I completely agree. Embrace the fact that this is as weak as you're going to get, and really enjoy that, because it's going to tell you a lot about yourself when you are a 15. It's going to tell you a lot about yourself when you're a 20.
Level
and
6. Like it doesn't take long before you like start to become the hero.
Right.
And you could argue that since you're level 3 you're a hero, but you know that idea. So that's what I'll say.
I love it. I think that's just about it. Why don't we sign this off? And Tears of Play doesn't immediately speak to like a theme or a vibe to me.
Yeah.
But if you're okay with doing all 3 tiers of play, I need to hear a level 1.
Oh God. Okay.
The world is yours.
The world is yours.